evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milford Exempted Village School District Board of Education to order. Mr. Espy, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving along, I'd like to have a motion for the approval of the agenda and the addendum that you received earlier this afternoon.
So moved. Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Need a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting on February 16th.
So moved. Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving right ahead, we go to the presentation section. Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. Before we turn it over to Mr. Josh Kaufman, I'd just like to make a brief statement this evening that the Milford community did lose one of our students this week. And this has been a devastating loss for the family, certainly for our students and staff as well. And I'd like to thank our mental health interventionist, Will Cates, for organizing them, our school psychs, the Claremont County crisis team that has been here the past 2 days, Mr. Daniels for organizing all of our circle tail dogs to be present at the high school, and other district members and other districts, surrounding districts, who have offered their support in our time of need. So just a big thank you to all of them, and thinking a lot about this family. Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Spicer. Board of Education, it's my privilege again to present to you some of our featured artists. If I could invite our featured artist from Boyd E. Smith to please come up to be recognized. We have some tremendous work from our students at Boyd E. Smith this month, and we are fortunate to have both Principal Espy and art teacher April Cooper with us this evening to recognize our students. We are going to go from oldest to youngest, and we are first going to recognize 6th grader Capri Garbinas. Capri. Yeah, if you want to just.
Which one is hers?
Yes, if you want to make the round. Capri has the mixed media that is second from the right. Second from the right. We've got a little less space up here than we normally do, I'm sorry. We have Kendall Johnson. Kendall is a 6th grader also, and Kendall has the clay sugar skull here. Congratulations. Beautiful. Congratulations. We have Lucy Nath. Lucy is a 5th grader, and Lucy has the beautiful watercolor and charcoal piece in the middle. We have Liam Ross. Liam is a 4th grader, and Liam's artwork is the quilted red and black geometric on the end. Congratulations. We have Mason Pendleton from the 3rd grade. Mason has our sewn sculpture here. Excellent job. We have maybe our first set of sisters. We have Catherine Roll, who is a 3rd grader. Catherine has this sewn sculpture. Catherine, congratulations. And we have little sister Ashton Roll, who's in 1st grade. Ashton, congratulations. And Ashton has the geometric quilting that's the pink and the purple and light blue here. And last but not least, we have a tremendous kindergartner, Lily. Congratulations, Lily. Well done. Lily has this beautiful watercolor right behind Miss Cooper here. So, good job. Congratulations. like to congratulate all of our student artists from Boyd E. Smith. Tremendous, tremendous work. And I will never pass up an opportunity to celebrate the arts, so I'd like to just share a few celebrations with you and reminders. The high school drama program will be putting on their last full performance in the Z, the Zamudio Theater, this weekend with Wizard of Oz. We are fully expecting a sellout, and about an hour ago, we just eclipsed 800 tickets sold. So we are more than 2/3 of the way sold. If you're coming to Wizard of Oz this weekend, please get your tickets now. Would also like to recognize senior Brooke Chamberlain, who has been named a finalist for the Cincinnati Arts Association Overture Awards in the category of musical theater. Would like to recognize our high school's winter drumline that was recently promoted to open class. So to receive a mid-season promotion is really a recognition of how well the program has done this year. They've essentially won every competition they've been out at, so they've been forced promoted to a more difficult class, which is a great honor. Our winter guard, our A guard, is undefeated, and our open guard, which is the equivalent of like our varsity guard, is currently ranked #1 in Ohio and #3 in the nation. They go to nationals here in a couple weeks. Finally, there's an item on the agenda related to the auditorium renovation for a little bit later this evening. So I wanted to share with you the architectural conceptual drawings that we've received. So just going to quickly highlight those. I know Mr. Johnson will share some more details later, but Steve, if you would, the first one. So I've got kind of before and then what we hope is close to after. So this is the current entrance to the theater. This is the architect's rendering of the new entrance to the theater. That'll be just outside of our gymnasium. This is the vestibule right inside the main doors, and that is what it is hopefully going to look at. This next one's kind of the wow for me. This is our existing theater and our future theater. And then there's just one more view of that as well. So a pretty dramatic change and much needed renovations to that space. We are looking forward to reopening the Z in January with an incredible performance. So thank you for all your support of the arts. We hope to see you at the District Fine Arts Fair later in April after next month's board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. This brings us to our first public participation. Do we have anybody?
Yes, Miss Rebecca Bourne.
I don't know how to do this.
No. Nope, it's coming.
Thank you so much. Rebecca Bourne, 1106 Fox Run Road in Milford. Mr. Epsy, thank you for that wonderful 5-year forecast. I can almost make sense of it. I'm not an accountant, but I begin to understand it. The 5-year forecast is scary. I attended the Finance Committee last week to better understand the board's approach. I see the financial challenge we're facing. It appears daunting. I heard the passion to maintain a quality school. I heard the reality of the size of the deficit and the challenge it poses to meet that need. It appears that at this moment, the board is going to ask for an 8.5 levy. I fear it will fail. Between the inflation we are experiencing and the tax increase passed by the junior high, there's a reluctance to take on more. A reasonable suggestion was made that a lower mill might have a better chance of passing. Yes, it would not meet the expected deficit, but if passed, it would get us started with some income. Another reasonable suggestion was to consider where cuts can be made. And yes, that won't fix the deficit, but it will signal that the administration is willing to work with the community. Difficult, challenging decisions, but ones that should be wrested out. I heard statements that that's not the way we do things, or once cut, something doesn't come back. I find those statements limiting. Challenging times call for courageous responses, to do something different, to maybe let go of something so it can come back stronger. And sometimes things shouldn't come back. When Milford was referred to as a Goldilocks school, I had to research what that meant. It refers to the just right concept. Personally, I've always thought Goldilocks was a girl who, without thought to the residents, plundered their resources and fled. With that thought, I don't want us to be a Goldilocks school. I'm resolved to come alongside you in this challenge. I'm prepared to pull together a task force to take an active role in assisting you in this dilemma. I'm somewhat skeptical of how many people I can engage in the actions I propose, because when you hosted that Finance 101, only 12 people came. It should not be up to our superintendent and our treasurer to meet with our legislators to express concern. We, the people, need to swamp them with our thoughts. In this task force, I will take a look at current proposed legislation like the backpack bill, the state budget, as to what priority does education represent, and build a case for shifting allocations, unfunded mandates, income tax possibility. Do you know that Goshen and Claremont Northeast have a 1% income? Local business contributions, and where does the lottery money go? My goal is to create a strong lobbying, to think outside the box and look for additional solutions. Some of our financial restraints and problems come from higher up, and we need to address it there. So that's what I'm going to do. I will keep you appraised about what happens. I know you guys probably all know this stuff. We don't, and it's about time we do, and that we join you in the efforts. Thank you.
That was almost perfect.
The other two are for the next section.
Okay. So let's move forward with the agenda then. Now we're going to move to the treasurer's report. Treasurer John Espy.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. I wanted to take a moment. I'm going to go through each of these items one by one and provide some insight onto where we are and where we're going and some of the challenges that we're facing. First, I'm going to go over the board reports. So we're 66% through the fiscal year, which is 8 months. Our salaries and benefits are trending where we would expect. Our purchase services are trending higher than expected due to the following factors. Duke Energy's billing change. We were not invoiced late in last fiscal year, and now those invoices are coming up just due to how Duke was essentially billing us. So now our purchase services look higher this fiscal year than they did last, when really if you average those two, they would be very similar. Also, diesel fuel continues to be a challenge with us. Although the prices are starting to come down, they're still considerably higher than expected. And then the impact from the sinkhole, we do not have, and I'm going to let Mr. Johnson talk about this more in his section a little bit later, but we do not have an estimate yet on how much the repair is going to cost, but that will be coming out of purchase services. When we look at our revenues, property tax timing is affecting them. We actually just got our property tax revenue in March, but keep in mind this report is detailing what happened in February, so they're not reflected here. Also, public utility, personal property, when we look at the analytics, because I'm now splitting that out, which is different from Mr. Rabe, what he had done, the analytics are somewhat confused because there is no history to go off of, but we do know that those are going to be populated. Also, when we look at the Fair School Funding implementation, what happened last year, which was the first year of the Fair School Funding Plan, was we did not receive the different buckets of revenue until January of '22. And so when we go back and look at what we received in January of '22 versus what we're receiving this month, it's different. I did want to bring up the interest revenue for the operating fund, February month to date, $48,304.63. Fiscal year to date, $317,377.28. And the bond fund, our February revenue was $203,445.84 for a fiscal year to date of $804,613.87. I will be getting more information on the arbitrage that I discussed in prior meetings, and for all of you that might not have been tuned in or watched or here, the district, when we took the bond revenue related to the middle school project, there was not 15% of it spent within the first year. So essentially the district was achieving revenue through investments and not spending more than 15%. So we owe the federal government a portion of that. And so we've engaged Densmore, which is our bond counsel, to help us with that calculation, and their CPAs are doing that. And we will, as I said, have that number and set that aside because we do not owe that until the end of the middle school project. And that is the board report. Any questions?
Hearing no questions, I need a motion to approve the board report as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any other discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Moving on to item 2, which is the COPS, which is Certificate of Participation Borrowing Plan. I did want to take a moment here to catch everyone up on where we are and kind of how we found ourselves in this position. So on this timeline, we can see that the board had approved the auditorium renovation in August of '22, approved the athletic facility in October of '22. The forecast that Mr. Ray brought to you in November was approved. Then, as well as the amended forecast, I initially showed that to the board at the work session. I think it was like my second day on the job in January. And then the board approved that. And so when we look at those items, all of those items were, correct me if I'm wrong, approved unanimously. Some of them predate my time with the district, but I believe that they were approved unanimously. And so we find ourselves looking at really what affected the forecast. And I'm going to talk about the forecast later and some trends that were going on, but I'm also, I want to bring up the capital expenditures because they are one of the major driving forces of the forecast that was approved. So when we look at the auditorium, it was a $2.6 million renovation, and that's not a new building. It's a renovation of the current auditorium, and it's based off of the auditorium audit that the district received in 2022. I've read the audit. There were things mentioned about safety, about upgrades, and essentially the auditorium had not had any major upgrades in its entire existence, which I believe was 1989. Also, the athletic facility. Due to the footprint of the middle school, the current Robbins building has to be abated, and so there's a need for what goes on in the Robbins building, which is wrestling and also a weight room, which has created a series of events. But the athletic facility proper is $12.5 million. There's also a middle school overage, and I want to address this because I had some community members reach out to me, and I think this was related to a comment that I made and Mr. Johnson made in the Finance Committee meeting. But in October of '22, the district learned that the middle school was the overage for the middle school, and this is fairly due to inflation, was $20 million. Through value engineering over the past several months, the district was able to get that down to $7.5 million. However, we project by the time the project is completed that the overage will be closer to $9.5 million. And so I have seen that number go around with 20 million. It's now at 7.5. We expect it to be at 9.5. And I do want to also talk about the fact that the district is bound by OFCC guidelines. Because we accepted the OFCC share of funds, we have to build that building to their guidelines and to their specs. You've heard Mr. Spicer talk about good, better, best. It's going to be a lot of good, but we realize that the good is substantially better than what we have, and it is still a very high quality for our community.
Real quick, and the OFCC told us how much we could estimate based on footage. So the original bond that we requested was based on OFCC numbers, which were low.
Yes.
As to what was costing them.
Yes, that's correct. Just a lot's happened since 2021 and now. When we look at also the bleacher project, which is $1.8 million, these bleachers are over 30 years old. And again, there's a bleacher inspection that happens every 2 years. and a part of the bleacher inspection, which I have read, has stated that there were issues with the south bleachers, which is leading the district to this expenditure. And again, all of these items were, again, correct me if I'm wrong, approved unanimously. And so there was a recognition by the board and by the district that these items have to be addressed as we go forward. So I was tasked with putting together a new forecast with those items in mind. And when I did that, we look at, to last the district 3 years and keep the district in good standing, that was $8.51 million. I had heard
Mills.
sorry, 8.51 mils, thank you. So that, if we were to delay that, it would go to 10.58 mils in 2024, 10.9 mils in 2025. And so as we looked at this, I heard from individual board members that reached out to me directly to say that they were concerned about that millage ask. And I addressed this in the Finance Committee meeting last Friday, and part of my marching orders, for lack of a better word, I felt like were to go and find a way to get that millage lower and find a way to make that more palatable. So that leads us to this borrowing plan. So now we're looking at March. We're going to be having a discussion, I hope, at a work session that will be TBA or decided tonight, to talk about all of the items that go into that millage amount and what that ask is, and also consideration of an amended 5-year forecast, and I will talk about that shortly as well. So the path forward is, last month I brought a recommendation to the board for a direct loan, and this was for $10 million and would partially fund the athletic facility. When we looked at that, the expenditures were spiking next fiscal year and then dropping back down, and that was leading to that 8.51 millage. So again, part of my marching orders were to go back and find a way to get that millage lower. And so what I did is I initiated conversation with our bond counsel, as well as Bradley Payne, who are municipal advisors, and started exploring the COPS financing. And COPS stands for Certificate of Participation. And I want to talk about the difference between a direct loan and a COPS issue. A direct loan is a lease purchase, and it's directly with a bank. A COPS issue is a lease purchase where we would borrow for a longer period of time, and we would have individual debtors, or we would essentially be going out on the capital market and having multiple people own part of that debt. So I can tell you, and part of the reason that I'm bringing this recommendation of the COPS financing is it will flatten out expenditures in the 5-year forecast, and it will immediately lower the levy millage. So
we've kind of come full circle from where we were a couple of years ago when we talked about doing this as a 30-year loan to push it out. That was with the previous board.
Mm.
So a new board comes on, different thoughts. We pushed it down to a non.
it was a 15-year, $10 million loan
Yeah.
directly with a bank. Versus now, this loan specifically, we would call it a 29-year because of where the borrowing actually follows. The COPS issue allows for the district to pay off that debt early with no penalty. It also allows the district to just flatten out the expenditures. And I also wanted to bring in the point for the 5-year forecast is we have to go out and essentially be rated for our debt through Moody's again. And that forecast would look a lot different, and you'll see how different it is later when we look at borrowing over 29 years versus borrowing over 15 and the spike in expenditures. We also have to keep in mind that COPS allows us to address the middle school overage, the athletic facility, the auditorium, and the bleachers whereas the direct loan is only partially covering the nest or athletic facility.
Because we were limited by 10 million in 15 years, if I remember
Right.
right. Is that correct?
Typically, banks will not loan and get into the direct loan without charging you higher interest rates if you go over 15 years with a direct bank loan. We're able to keep the interest competitive with the capital market, which we expect. We've forecasted to be 5% interest. It could actually be lower. When you look at the Silicon Valley Bank collapse as of recently, the interest is going lower. It's having an inverse effect of what we might think. And I also wanted to bring up that the COPS issue includes a $600,000 contingency for all projects. Finally, a point on that would be that if any of these projects were to be under budget, that the COPS revenue could be used for other permanent improvement needs and help out the general fund and not have to transfer into the PI fund for PI needs. So it's not a blank check. The way that I look at it is each one of these projects would have its own bucket of money within the PI fund and be held to that budget. So again, the path forward continued would be that this addresses part of the millage concerns, but I think that there still needs to be further discussion. And from what I heard from the Finance Committee is the board would like further discussion as well. And so what I'm suggesting is we set a work session up to discuss the board's priorities, how that impacts the millage, and then that would allow me to go back and work with the admin team to try to identify additional efficiencies, allow me to go back and then set up and get the resolution ready for a millage that the board would be in favor of and then allow us to move forward with the April regular meeting of passing a resolution of necessity to initiate the levy process. I wanted to also address a couple other questions in this section. There were some community members that had questions as to, they did not realize that an operating levy could fund a permanent improvement or a capital improvement in the district. And when you look at Milford, we are tied for the lowest permanent improvement millage of all Claremont and Hamilton County districts that have a PI levy. So when you look at this, all of the districts above us have higher millage coming into their permanent improvement fund. Our half mill was actually moved from inside millage in 2010, and it is part of the requirement of OFCC projects. It yields about $658,500 a year, and that is meant to keep up all 6 elementary schools, a portion of the high school, and once the new middle school is completed, that as well. And it would actually be the portion that's not the locally funded initiative, the 6th grade area of that middle school. So when we look at that, $658,000 is not, it's a large sum of money, but it's not what is needed to be able to keep those buildings up. So in short, the lack of more robust PI funds has led the district to rely on the general fund for capital improvements and maintenance. And this is something that has gone on for years here. This is not something new. It's gone on, really, before 2010, there were no mills coming into the permanent improvement. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then additional items that are continuing to go under discussion within the admin team in the district is value engineering efforts for all of the projects in the district. Mr. Spicer and I have met with several potential groups for naming rights of the athletic facility. Those proceeds would go directly toward loan payments and help offset that burden on the general fund for those payments. And we're continuing to identify cost savings. This is something that's going on. I can't think of a day in the, since I've been here that we haven't talked about costs and how we keep them lower. So I just wanted to bring that up for the community and the board to consider. Any questions?
No, but I don't have a question, but I would like to make a comment for people here, for people watching now or later. Through emails, phone calls, personal conversations, I think there's a couple things that need to be clarified. This happened back in the early 2000s also, for whoever was around back then, when the community voted for neighborhood elementary schools. Then the operating levies to run them failed. The same thing is happening, well, we're not to failing yet, but I've had phone calls, emails, conversations with people saying, well, you just passed that bond in 2021. So I just want to clarify that that is for building the junior high, not for operating the schools. And so that's what the levy is for. So it's two separate things. I've also got a lot of rumblings about the junior high being over budget and people alluding to people aren't working within the constraints they're given and being irresponsible with money. And I just want to clarify with Jeff and John that, to my understanding, and I think John Espy, you just said this also, that is because of inflation, because the difference between the estimates in 2021 and where we are in 2023. This is not because we're adding things or making decisions of upgrades, and this is just inflation, correct?
Well, it's not just inflation, it's also the fact that everything is, we have to go with what OFCC says. It's either good, better, or best. So we're selecting everything as good. That's the minimum that we have to do. So everything in that building is minimal. Something that might not be minimal would be the brick on the front, because you don't want a cinder block looking front of a building. And so that would be something that would not be considered just good. We would probably go with better or best so that the facade of the building would look a little bit better. That would be one example. But we are constrained by OFCC. The other thing to remember is the numbers that John put up there are estimates. Those are not actual numbers yet. We were going to cover that a little bit in the middle school update. So I think that piece is very important for folks to remember. The other thing that Jeff did that we were all mad at him for doing, but he was right, is this building started out as a 226,000 square foot building, and we got it down to 206 because it was going to be over because of inflation. No, Jeff, no. And sure enough, it was. So we reduced it by 20,000 square feet, if you will, thinking that that would help, and it really hasn't. So there are multiple factors, but yes, it's not due to the gold-plated bathrooms that are going in.
Right, but the gist is that we're not over because people are making decisions to add or upgrade.
Correct, correct. We're taking away as much as we can.
Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. And then the other piece I just want people to remember is, as we all talk about these millage for the levies, there will be 0 scenarios that everyone's happy. So some people will be in favor of, whatever levy we put on. Fortunately, those people have the money to say yes, whatever, and there will be people who are opposed to whatever levy we put on. So I think we need to focus on trying to meet the most in the middle and compromise, from the administration, and the community needs to be on board in favor of voting for a levy. The administration needs to be cognizant that a lot of people don't have extra money, and this is going to weigh on people, and I think we just need to find a way to, those people who will never vote for a levy and those who will vote for any levy, and then those who are, somewhere in between. So I just think there's a lot of things that people need to remember are going into this.
And John, I know that we've had several conversations in the past few weeks about the levy and the size of the levy. And
the loan, the COPS loan, as an alternative to the direct loan, although bigger and longer, if it rides the entire 29 years, we will absolutely pay more in interest because the sheer size of it and the fact that it's 29 years. The fact of the matter is, these capital projects are hitting us in a really poor time. And this is a decision that the board is faced with, is to say, can we flatten extreme cash outlay out a bit so that we don't burden our taxpayers in the very next levy cycle? I mean, at the end of the day, the why is we've got to find a way to operate as the least costly that we can and deliver a great service. At the same time, we're tied into capital projects that have been long overdue. That's my clear understanding of why we're doing the COPS loan, is to make sure that it's palatable over the next several years for us to catch our breath, pass an operating levy that may look a little different than the 851 that was proposed, to be a little bit more palatable for the public. Is that fair to say? That's the primary reason why we explored a different way to lower the millage, is to spread those costs out longer. And one of the things that was out of my mouth question very early is, can we pay this off early? Because there were several folks in the community that have 30-year loans on their homes, 15-year loans on their homes. I know several that will do the 30 and pay like they're paying on a 15, and they pay it off faster as a result. And one of the first questions I ask you is, let's make sure if we're even considering this, we can pay early, and you confirmed that we could, which was pleasing to me, is every single time that we have some extra cash, we should try to reduce that debt. You were on board with that, but the first question is that exactly why we're going down this path for COPS?
Yes. It's to spread the expenditures out, not burden the community with a bubble of expenditures that would affect the millage ask.
And the second piece after, and I'm sure that we'll get to this, I don't know if it's here in the work session, that's going to have an impact already on the 851 proposal.
Yes.
Admittedly, I'm one of the board members that is asking the administration to find every single way that they can to drive efficiencies in our cost structure. And I'm really encouraged to hear what those ideas are. And I think there are some ideas that our administration has, and I haven't heard the details of those, but I'm certainly very, very encouraged to hear those, because I'm on a mission, and I think most of us are, to try to deliver the best education that we possibly can at the lowest cost. I'm always the one that says, can we do it better for less? And it comes out of my mouth like a broken record, and that's never going to change for me. I'm wired that way. So this isn't the only measure we're taking, is the COPS issue, but it's going to be a great help to the community when the levy does show up. And I'm looking forward to the additional piece as well. And John, I know you and the team have been working on that. So I just wanted to mention really quickly at a high level, there's a lot of things that have been going on about how do we reduce this burden when this levy shows up. What I've learned is that our state underfunds public schools, and it's pretty significant. And it's a travesty, really, how our state funds our public schools. And I've learned that operating levies are a very, very real part of survival in public schools. So make no mistake, I don't like to pay exorbitant taxes, but I understand that taxes for public schools are the necessary evil, and we've got to move forward. I just want it to be as low as it can possibly be, to be clear.
And one of the other things is, we've talked about, and we kind of joke with the phrase, kicking the can down the road. We've kicked the can down the road for a lot of years to get to where we are, where we now have to pay. Equally important to getting this all the financial pieces right is making sure we're watchdogs for kicking the can down the road again. You gotta put aside some money to maintain the things that you have. It's, you know, it's like if you've got a leak in your roof, you might be able to get rid of it, you know, you might be able to live with it for a couple of months, but when the roof starts falling in, then you got a bigger problem. We need to make sure that we maintain as a district that those investments that we're making every day. Because if we don't, we're may not be this board, but it'll be another board that'll be in the same bucket that we're in right now. So my challenge is to be watchful, to set aside some money in funds, so if you put X dollars in a fund and you don't spend it this year, it's there next year when you might need to spend twice that amount. So we just need to be careful that we're not picking up the can finally and then kicking another can down the road. Because if we do that, shame on all of us. That's how we got here right now. Other comments? Okay, so we need a motion to approve the COPS issue resolution as it's been presented to us.
So moved.
Second?
I think we've had discussion.
I have a quick question for
Sure.
John. John, is this vote currently to approve the 10 for 29? I mean, I'm sorry, the 27 for
27.
29? Is
Yes.
that what this vote is to do?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be clear.
Yes. It's kicking off the process for me to do that. The loan will not close until mid-May, which
does
is a
that-
timeline issue, and that's why I'm bringing it to you right now.
Does it have impact on construction starts? Is it pushed back a month, one of the projects?
We're going to try to work with our vendors to see if we can start some work, but not have, you know, put the PO in place once the money's in place.
Okay.
So we're gonna work with our vendors on that.
Okay.
Okay, but this binds us to going after, this vote binds us to going after a loan.
Yes, and I would not go any further with the 10 million loan, just so everyone is aware. That would stop.
In the four capital projects included in this is the middle school overage, the nest, the auditorium, and the bleachers, correct?
Yes,
And you've baked in 600K of contingency into that loan as well, correct?
yes,
And that comes out, based on what I saw on the screen up here, to exactly 27 million.
Okay. And again, no prepay.
Penalty.
no prepay penalty.
No money down. Any other discussion? Mr. Espy, call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan,
Yes.
Mr. Combs.
Yes.
Mrs. Mason,
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda.
Yes, thank you.
So, the next item is the 5-year forecast, and I wanted to provide this to you as an update so you can see how this changes, and it's substantial. So, when we look at the March forecast that I'm bringing to you for approval this evening versus the last filed forecast, the only change that's happening are the operating transfers out to help flatten, essentially flatten that transfer for capital improvements. This is a visual representation, and the gray area up here is the savings due to the COPS issue. And so you can see the district would have gone cash negative between 2025 and 2026, and now that cash negative pushes out between 26 and 27. If we were to look at the expenditures from the February forecast on the left to the March forecast on the right, you can see that they flatten out and are much more stable and predictable in terms of going up versus the spike that you would see in 24 to 25 and then to 26 in the February forecast.
And that is to scale, and parallax error
Yes,
being
those-
what it is, that is to scale. The numbers on the right are lower than the numbers on the
Yeah, and it's hard to see, but there are actually numbers down here. This will be on the website, so you can jump in and take a look, but those are to scale.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. Over the 5 years of this forecast, going with that COPS issue saves the district $13.8 million in cash as it's spread out. So it's hard to say that it saves the district, but it stretches out over time that cost. That's not to say that we don't still have an issue with our spending versus our revenues. The black area is showing our revenue in form of a bar chart. As the gray, which are our expenditures, take over the revenues, it has a negative effect on the yellow cash balance. And you can see that as the chart that I alluded to with the gray savings area, that number reconciles to negative $6.4 million in year 5 of the forecast. I know this is small, and I promise I'm about to blow this up a little bit so everyone can see it, but this is 6.010, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important lines of the forecast. When you look at this and you see the forecast trends, deficit spending began in the district during the 2020-2021 school year. And I also want to note that during the 2019-2020 school year, revenues were over expenditures by $2,774. And we call that a rounding issue in my world. So
We called that a win at the time.
it's a win. It's definitely a win. The black text is better than the red text in that year, but I do want to point out that we were starting to get close there. I also want to point out that the state cut part of our revenue in 2020 and 2021 due to COVID-19. We ended up getting some of it back, but there were still reductions to what we were supposed to get at the beginning of the 2019-20 school year and 2020-2021 school year. When we look, this is the way I look at fiscal distress or financial health. When we look at the left, the February forecast, we would have started fiscal year 24, which is the 23-24 school year, in fiscal warning. So we would have skipped caution and gone straight to warning. Because of this borrowing plan, we stay out of caution or warning until we get into fiscal year 25. I do want to caution everyone, though. I'm giving you good news, but it's not great news. And if we were to wait another period of time, longer than November, that the millage will go back up, because the longer we wait, the higher the millage we have to seek to keep the district in good financial health. Some key takeaways. As I said, deficit spending began in 2020-21. However, we were very close to doing that in 1920. The May 2013 operating levy has stretched 10 years, and that's 6 more years than the deliverable promised at the time of 4 years. We're actually going to report back to the board at our upcoming work session ahead of April's regular meeting. And then based off of what we hear at that work session and the discussion that we have, I will be bringing a recommendation for the required millage to keep the district in good standing financially for 3 years. I also wanted to point this out. I pulled this today, and I thought this was really interesting. When you look at the years between operating levies for Milford, the average is 4.125 years for all of the operating levies. And Mrs. Nolan did a really good job of talking about the differences of operating versus bond. I've pulled out all the bonds. This is bond issues. This is primarily operating issues. And so this would be the longest period of time the district has ever gone without seeking an operating levy. And I also wanted to point out that since the 2000s, the longer the district waits, the higher the ask has been. There's been a correlation there. So finally, this is a QR code to the Treasurer website. We're updating it all the time. I also have the videos from the Money Matters that I've been doing and putting out every other week on there for the community. to see. So that's all I have for the 5-year forecast.
And if I can put a plug in for your next meeting, if this is the appropriate place.
Thank you.
There's a video of your last meeting
Mhm.
on the website. I'm assuming it's on your
It
Twitter.
won't be inverted this time, we
Okay.
promise.
Yeah, you should talk to your IT professionals. But there is, for people who want to talk, this isn't a great venue for community members to really engage and ask questions of the Johns, but that on March 22nd?
Yes, Wednesday.
Next Wednesday is a great opportunity for folks to.
At
get
Mulberry.
At Mulberry.
And the time, again,
6 PM.
6 PM, Wednesday, March 22nd, Mulberry Elementary.
I would just like to encourage everybody here, watching it later, tell your friends, people really need to come and learn how schools are financed. I've learned a lot in the last 14 months since I've been on the board. And if you understand how it's financed, then you then realize that these levies are necessary. And what the previous screen showed, we haven't had one in 10 years. The average, correct me if I'm wrong, is 3 years. Most districts go on for levies every 3 years, because that is how you generate the money to actually run the schools. And again, we're getting calls, emails, conversations. Don't vote to put a levy. There will be a levy on the next, in November. Like, that's not a question. There will be a levy. We're just deciding the amount, right? And so for people that may not understand how it's financed, please come to these things. Watch some of John's videos, come ask questions, sit down and talk, because it really gives a better understanding of why these levies are necessary. So.
You know, one of the things that, as you referred to them, the two Johns down there, one of the things that they do best is if you ask them a question, they will get back with you. It's typically within 24 hours, unless it falls across a weekend, then it might go from Friday to Monday. But these guys are all over communicating. These are two of the best communicators I've worked with in 50 years, so.
But you're only 25.
And I'm only 25. It's dog years. Okay, so we've got a 5-year forecast that has been presented to us. I need a motion to approve it as presented.
So moved. Second?
Any further discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Number 4, and I don't have a presentation to go along with this one.
Darn.
This is due to our principals at our buildings have done fundraisers, and they've brought money in that now need to be appropriated in their 018s. The same has happened for our student groups and the 200 funds. So this just allows us to increase the appropriation to allow them to spend what they've made. And that's really all that's going on here with this appropriation resolution.
And we kind of wrangle with this every month anyway, right?
It's been my style in previous districts to bring it every month, just to make sure we're always compliant with the county auditor. So if the board is okay with that, I'd like to continue to do that.
Mr. Rabe did that as well, so.
Okay,
I don't
great.
think that's an issue.
And so we would need to take action on that, and then I can explain 5 and 6.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the appropriations resolution as you have received.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Call roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Number 5 is an MOU with MEA. This is allowing the district to pay the MEA officers, and then we would invoice MEA and be reimbursed for that amount. It's just an ease for both groups, for the district and MEA.
Okay, I need a motion to approve this MOU for the MEA.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion, and I'm going to start with, is this something that we are doing different than we have in the past, or is this just
Every year.
it's an every year
Yep.
thing? I blanked on that one, so I apologize for that. Any discussion?
It's a net zero, I mean,
Net zero, yep.
so. It's just a finance mechanism.
Yep.
Not even finance, it's
Helps-
just a
helps
accounting-
everyone out.
accounting
Yep.
mechanism.
Puts it on their paycheck. With no other discussion, call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Number 6 is a donation that we received. It was not necessarily earmarked for anything, so it would just be donated to the general miscellaneous receipts in the general fund.
Okay, I need a motion to approve this generous donation of $4,935.36.
So moved. Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Thank you, Mr. Kimmen, is the discussion.
Yes. Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to superintendent's business, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. Middle school update, we are still in our design development phase with documents, and we are coming towards the end of that, and then we'll be moving into construction documents, and then once we get construction documents, we'll get another estimate, and then we'll move into our guaranteed maximum price. So nothing really to report at this time, other than the other piece to that is that we are hoping to have a groundbreaking ceremony about 4:30, which would be prior to the next board meeting on the 20th, April 20th, is that right? And so we'll have that. I did ask Jeff Johnson to come in as well to talk about the front yard, not the backyard, but the front yard. We have a sinkhole. So I've asked Jeff to speak a little bit about our sinkhole out front. We do have some pictures for you as well.
Yes, excuse me, the follow up on what Mr. Spicer said about the middle school real quick. Conger is in the process currently of updating their estimates. We talked a little bit earlier about where we were with SD estimates and the value engineering. Basically, we go through that same process again, and that's what we're in right now. So they're tweaking, you know, it's a process to do the design. You start off, you kind of think schematic, then design, then construction. It gets a little more detailed as you go. So those estimates are redone. They should get more accurate, if you will, and they're in the process of updating those estimates as we speak. And we hope by the next board meeting that we'll have an update of where we're at as far as where those estimates are. As Mr. Spicer said, about 2 weeks ago, we came in on a Wednesday morning and found a hole in the ground out in the practice field and practice area. Through research and figuring out what was going on, we've got a hole in a fairly significant storm pipe that has created that sinkhole. It is about 25 feet deep in the ground, which is fairly significant. So me and my team have been working with multiple contractors to try to come up and get quotes and get pricing on how we fix this. We have isolated the area with some snow fencing around it to keep people away from the area. So we've made it safe. We moved the band tower away from it, to keep people out from it. We've got signage all over the place. And we are currently in the process of getting quotes to not only fix the storm pipe that failed, but then also get some quotes to about 225 feet of corrugated metal pipe that is deteriorating, that we can line that pipe so that we don't have this same situation happen again. So we don't have those quotes in yet, but we're working on them and hope to have them very soon and be able to actually get that situation addressed. So I don't know if you back up, I don't know if you've gone through them all or not yet, Steve, but so this is the area. You can see the small hole in the ground. If you get to the bottom of that hole. It's a lot wider, which is why we've got the snow fencing as wide as it is. If you go to the next one, that's a drone footage that we put over the holes, so you can kind of see where the pipe is collapsed and where that's at. And then the last one is actually from inside the pipe, where you can see basically what happens. That pipe opens up, it collapses, and then the dirt, as rain goes through, falls into it and is washed down, and that's what creates the pocket that then creates the hole in the ground. So we're working diligently to try to get the experts to get the quotes. We're working on 3 quotes to get those and bring that back to the board in order to get that fixed.
I have a middle school question.
Yes, ma'am.
When we look at, a little bit longer, but like,
The process of going through the SD estimates did take a little bit longer than they should have. We're still okay, but we don't have any wiggle room at this point in time. So that's kind of where we're at from a schedule standpoint.
So there's still no risk to us being able to move in the fall with maybe the alternate schedule?
Did you say no risk?
There's always risk.
I didn't weasel word it, no.
I call it the way I see it. I'm not gonna lie to you. Is there risk? There's risk. But that's what we're working on with our partners, to make sure we mitigate that the best we can. You know, the best thing we've got to do now is, when we get this DD estimate, we've got to get it resolved. We've got to get it reconciled between SHP's estimate, Conger's estimate, and we need to get moving on construction drawings on schedule. Otherwise, we risk not opening in the fall of '25. And I don't say that to scare everybody. I'm not worried about it. I'm not laying awake at night thinking about that. But as I talked to Mrs. Chestnut, we don't have a lot of wiggle room at this point in time, but we're still good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Under item 2, we do have our first reading of the following 3 policies. No action today, but we will next month. And then asking for your approval of numbers 3 and 4, we have policy BDDA, and also approval of the 23-24 Ohio High School Athletic Association resolution to continue our membership with them.
Okay, I need a motion to approve item E. That's 2 and 3.
3 and 4.
3 and 4, excuse me. Yeah, 3's down at the bottom of the previous page.
So
3 and
moved.
4.
Second.
Discussion?
Quickly about the BDDA.
Yes, go ahead. I've got Paul coming up because he's
Oh.
our policy guru.
In 2002, there was a court case about a notice rule. And it requires, the Ohio Revised Code requires you as a public body, including boards of education, to establish a rule of a reasonable method whereby any person may determine the time and place of all regular scheduled meetings. We are actually going through a policy revision, and Mrs. Nolan was actually there with us, and she heard that there are some cases floating around, people doing some records requests and doing some court filings and taking districts to court because they may have some outdated rules in terms of, a good example is, a newspaper no longer, we could notify the Inquirer that we're having a meeting, but they can make the choice whether to publish that or not. So what we are putting in is that you as a board, the model policy established that the district website is a reasonable method for the public to determine the time and place of all regularly scheduled meetings and the time, place, and purpose of all special meetings. So the language was added in February 17th of this year. The language was added requiring the board to post advance notices of its meeting on the district website. And we were advised to consider updating this policy as soon as possible to formalize the notice method. We also do have a mechanism in there that if you are still not someone that feels comfortable using the internet, or it's not a place you regularly go, there is a mechanism in BDDA that you can do individual notices as well. So we're compliant there, but it's making sure that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, because media outlets can pick and choose what they want to cover, and we can say that our website accurately depicts the time, the place, and the purpose of all regular and special board meetings. And if we can save our public a few dollars of not being sued and being compliant, that's a win. So that's why this one is separate.
And I was going to ask you about that individualization. If somebody doesn't want to go on the website, how would they contact you to request a different, or what would be the different method of notification, and how would they request that?
It's currently inside of our policy. I think they can individually contact the treasurer. I'm not sure if that's the exact language, John, but that does not change. What we are changing is.
They can drop off stamped envelopes is what it said.
Yeah,
if you
so
want.
you have to
They'll
drop,
print it
yeah.
off and mail it to you.
Yeah, so there is a mechanism already in there, and we're not touching that.
As far as transparency goes, I just want to say, if we're allowed to toot our own horn, Milford does a really good job of transparency of not only meeting notifications, but minutes, because I went, after Mrs. Nolan and I talked about committee meetings, I went searching on local districts for their committee meetings, times, and it was a bear to find them. Ours were the most readily available. Some of them did not have them at all. So I really appreciate, even more, after going seeking it, I could find ours very easily, and our transparency is really top-notch.
And we will schedule a committee of the whole probably June or July, when we actually finish reviewing the policy. We're getting into sections now where Jeff, Jenny, Rob, myself, we've touched the financial pieces. Now we're working on the other pieces. So we work in buckets with the experts, so we don't have to pull people from their day-to-day tasks.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on item 3 and 4. Any other discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to Human Resources Business, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. Asking for your approval under items F 1 through 4.
Okay, we need a motion to approve items F 1 through 4 as received.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
I wanted to say,
Go
call out
ahead.
the retirement of
Yes.
Mrs. Leslie Butcher has had 3/4 of my children. She's really been a great 6th grade teacher. I'm only sad she won't be there for my 4th to come through, but she's really been a pillar for all of my kids, and I wish her well in her retirement.
The other two that I wanted to point out is Stephanie Flynn, who has been a nurse at the high school for some time. And then also point out under the number 2 exempt, Debbie Robinson. Debbie has been a staple in this community and certainly in this office area. She has decided to follow her passion, and she is now heading up to Sammy Sunshine Fund. Go online, help her out. She's a wonderful human, and we're going to miss her greatly.
No doubt. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for items 1 through 4. Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to Section G, Curriculum Instruction, Superintendent John Spicer.
Asking for your approval of item G1, summer school update and fees.
Need a motion to approve the summer school fees.
So moved. Second?
Discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. Moving on to item H, Business Operations, Superintendent John Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda. Members of the board, we have 4 items asking for your approval of the quick claim deed. We'll start with that one. So,
This was the addendum. This is to separate the parcel that the field house is on. It actually include the field house and Eagle Stadium, as well as basically the drive that comes into it. This will allow the COPS issue that you guys just approved earlier tonight. It's basically just splitting the parcel, we're giving it to ourselves.
And we've talked about this for months, either privately or actually in meetings as well. This is just something that the lawyers decided they needed to bring it to the board.
Yes, it's actually required because we can't borrow through the COPS issue by OFCC. So that's the driver to this, is to be able to separate that parcel. So this parcel will not be on the same parcel as the new middle school. That's the real driver behind this.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Did we get a motion
I
and
don't
second?
Did we get a motion?
I don't believe we did.
No, we
negative,
just
not
went
yet.
right on to discussion. Excuse me.
We did. Jeff jumped right in. He was anxious.
I need Jeff's very efficient here. I need a motion to approve.
Are we doing all 4, are we consent all 4 of them at once, or are we just doing
No,
the
we'll,
quick?
we'll separate the 4
We are
out.
Quick,
not
okay, so
this
just the
time.
quick claim.
Yep.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
President Miranda, members of the board, asking for your approval to award the Milford High School auditorium project to Kramer and Feldman for $1.884 million.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the award for the auditorium project, Kramer and Feldman.
So moved. Second.
Discussion?
I would just like to say one thing. Again, rumblings through the community via conversations, emails, and phone calls. People a little dismayed that we voted to renovate the auditorium because they voted no for it in 2019. And I will just say, again, Mr. Espy noted that all 5 of us voted to do that, so it was unanimous. 1, there were safety issues, and 2, it had been since 1989, 30-something years. It just needed to be done. All you had to do was look at a lot of the things, so I just wanted to, just to note that.
And additionally, this is scaled down. That in 2019, the bond included a brand-new building with additional seating. This is our same space with safety, but some additional seating because of how it's reworked, but for a much smaller dollar amount.
And it's been value engineered down to 33% of what we were talking about when we ran the bond in 2019.
Yeah, in the Finance Committee, it was we talked about 2.6, and this award that we're getting ready to vote on is coming in at just under 1.9. So there's been a couple of back and forths with this group. Yeah?
We separated out a couple of scopes of work. One was the audio, because we went with the contractor that has done the audio, knew the layout. So that's another one that we'll bring back to you next month for approval. It's approximately $100,000. So there's a little bit more there. And then there's a signage quote that we got for about $20,000. But if you remember when the report came in that you guys looked at, there was a 10-year plan to kind of take chunks of it every year over the next 10 years. And we came to the board and said, there's some real efficiencies to doing this all at once. What you're seeing today is I don't know when to say most, it's a big chunk of the efficiencies of doing this all at once, rather than doing, the audio visual one year, the seats another year, the carpet, and just kind of trying to spread it out over 10 years, doing it all at once. It's very congruent because it's all together in one design and one project, and you get a lot of efficiencies in doing that. So I think you're seeing, you know, what we talked about when we decided to do the entire renovation project at once as opposed to trying to parcel it out over 10 years.
And so I would just implore anyone who might be questioning that decision to go take a tour of it before it is renovated.
Better get there before next week.
Hey, you got,
Friday
Hey,
night.
there's a
You've
great
got-
show coming up this weekend, right,
you've
Josh?
got 10 days. Yeah, again, not to beat a dead horse, because I don't think you can beat this horse dead, that's more value engineering on the part of the administration to make things happen that are more cost-effective for us. And it does move the needle. Where are we? Have a motion?
We have a
Call the
motion
roll.
and second.
Any other discussion? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
Asking for your approval of the Eagle Stadium scoreboard.
You need a motion to approve the Eagle Stadium scoreboard?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
So one of the things that, with the field house and concession area that's going in, the scoreboard that is in Eagle Stadium right now is really basically where the concession stand building is going to go. That concession stand is also, if I'm not mistaken, about 25 years old, plus or minus.
It's a little older than that, yeah.
Maybe a little bit older than that, I'm not sure. The video board that's there is a real struggle to repair and keep up. So Mr. Zupka, our athletic director, has been looking into upgrading that scoreboard for, I don't know, a year, maybe two even. So everything, kind of like some of the other things we're going through, things have all come together. This is the structure, this is the scoreboard, this is a video board that will get installed on the west side of the stadium, so the opposite side of the field that the current scoreboard is. There'll be a state-of-the-art video board within the scoreboard, very similar if anybody's gone into our basketball gym, volleyball gym, and seen those scoreboards. It's going to be very similar to that. The same software will run that video board. This is a turnkey. Everything's included except we still need to deliver electric to the board. But other than that, everything's included. We do have some influx of monies to offset this. Our athletic boosters have generously offered to give us $20,000 toward this project. And we also have $30,000 in ad revenue that we've earned from the gymnasium scoreboards that will go towards offsetting these costs. The video board, we will continue to earn money from ads in the gymnasium, but also this video board, so those revenues should increase. And we've talked about in committee that those revenues that come in for the ads would go towards offsetting these costs over time. So I think it'll be a great add to the stadium. And again, we want to get this purchase order in place so that this scoreboard and video board will be in place by August 1st for the fall season.
So now that is the scoreboard part of the COPS?
It is not. It's part of the transfers that are in the forecast, however.
Okay.
I do want to say thank you again to our boosters for supporting projects like this. It really helps when they give us money to help with these projects.
Yeah, the more people on the end of the rope pulling, the easier the work. I do want to say one other thing. We've had that scoreboard went in during the 1999 season, the one that's existing there right now. And that was championed by Doug and Kathy Streif and their family. Yeah, we do go out there every August and turn it on and hope that it fires up. And sometimes it hasn't. But
That was a great addition, bringing us to state-of-the-art in 1999, and now we move forward with that. But many thanks to Doug and Kathy, and their company was Control Works at the time. They did a great job for us, and, should be commended for that effort, because that was not easy.
Yeah, and I also want to point out to the board that we did have a second quote that we started with that was approximately $350,000. So we kind of went, wait, let's keep digging and keep digging. And so I think there's a significant savings from kind of where we started off with.
A little more value engineering. Any other comments? Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.
And finally, under business operations, the resolution for urgent necessity.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the resolution for urgent necessity.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
This just really allows us to take advantage of we've talked a lot about efficiencies, on these projects we're doing. So this allows us to take advantage of some efficiencies and keep our costs down for the Fieldhouse project.
They'll already have their equipment in place and.
Correct.
Or it will come in place for that and then just stay, so the benefit is there.
So to be a little bit clearer, this is for staging?
We have two projects that are separate projects. They're separately funded, but they sit on top of each other. And the efficiencies of having an architect and a construction manager that are on both projects will save the district a lot of money. Hard to put an exact dollar figure on it, but the idea of doing these two projects with two different firms,
Would it make you
that's
lose your hair?
something that would keep me awake at night. So the efficiencies are just, it's hard to really describe how much easier and better and more cost-effective it'll be to do these two projects with the same two firms. These two buildings sit 30 feet across from each other.
Yep.
So we'll be able to take and get a lot of savings really for both projects by doing this.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, right?
Yes.
Okay, call the roll.
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you. This brings us to our second public participation portion of the evening.
Yes, we have Asher Stoltz.
My name's Asher. I live at 5477 South Garrett Drive. So I came to talk about the Amplify program at the middle school and the Gifted program at both the middle school and the junior high. So starting with Amplify, what I've noticed between different students and just the teachers is that it's very repetitive. We go through the same stuff, and I've learned more in just the short lessons we've done with teachers outside of Amplify than us sitting in class for an hour, sitting on the program, staring at a computer. It's not very effective at teaching. It's more of just beating the topic into us instead of actually making us want to learn it. And then going on to the Gifted program, kind of mixing that in with Amplify, is Amplify isn't very diversified between the gifted and the non-gifted students. There's slight differences, but it's not really differentiated. And then going into the elementary schools, when you take away their GEMS time for like every other week, like I heard in the last meeting, what it's doing is it's taking away the opportunities that these kids who need the challenge and giving them stuff that not everyone needs. So like if someone finishes all their work, at least during MetaView when I was in it, during team time, it was just like you would go to different classes, you would work on extra work. But now for GEM students, you get to go and do something else extra. But now that it's been taken away, or it's going to be taken away, it's taking away the opportunities that the students have been given.
Okay, any others?
Like,
Yes, Mr. Patrick Szymanski.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Szymanski, and I live at 255 Miami Lakes Drive in Milford. I was a school board member for 8 years in my previous district. Before that, I was part of a trio that led our levy committee in that school. I'm very familiar with your superintendent's comment that this levy is to maintain what we have. I experienced that in my previous district, where from 2007 to 2012, we were frequently on the ballot. It was difficult for our aging community to believe it was necessary. We had businesses moving out, reducing our tax base, and the state continued to reduce their share of funding. Your board VP made an interesting comment at the finance meeting about people who live and move to Milford. I believe, compared to my old district, Milford offers a rich, diverse offering, and the staff I have met through the CSA meetings are excellent and knowledgeable. The VP's comments at our board meeting would have led to extended discussion on what courses are important to our school and community culture. I heard only some short discussion, but not any details by board members of what is key and what, if any, courses are expendable. I wonder what makes Milford desirable and what courses could be removed without losing the elements that attract parents to Milford. I hope you have some discussions on the limited time left with the superintendent and treasurer about course offerings and culture. There's much I would like to say, but 3 minutes is limiting. So I urge you to listen to your superintendent, who seems to be trying to keep Milford an attractive school district. I hope you can agree on what is important to you as a board to keep Milford that attractive school district. I wish you good luck in reaching consensus on issues like this, because it is always tough.
That's it.
That is it? Okay, thank you. We now have concluding items.
Can I? All right. I just wanted to address a few things that I heard this evening. Rebecca Bourne, who could not stay with us, made some great comments. John and I cannot do this alone. We cannot speak to our representatives and legislators alone. We do need you. The other thing is there is already a vehicle, and Rebecca is part of it, and that's the Citizens Advisory Commission. So I'm going to reach out to her and ask her to bring this task force that she's talking about to the Citizens Advisory Commission. There's over 25 people that are on that, so I would encourage her to do that. The other, Asher, gifted stuff. I just want you to know that I did meet with about 20 parents. Some of them are here. And we're working with our gifted teachers and our building principals, looking at the current plan, and hope to have something in May, late May, to, what will it look like for next year. So thank you for coming this evening. Very brave of you to stand up there for 3 minutes. Thank you. Yes, yes. And Patrick Szymanski, is on our Citizen Advisory Commission, and thank you for the comment.
I just wanted to bring up that we needed to schedule the work session, and I also, as we've discussed what this work session will be, there will not be a vote. So I know, Mr. Combs, we had talked about you not being able to be there, but maybe being able to be remote. I think that would work if you're good with keeping it on the 27th.
Yeah, if there's no vote.
Yeah, there would not be a vote. It would be discussion only.
Yep. Yeah, if it's discussion only, I'm in that day. Like I said, I have unavoidable travel that week.
Okay, so someone will write that down and send out a meeting notification to all of us so we can.
I just want to make sure everyone, all of the board is good for the 27th.
Time?
6?
I think we talked about 6. Yeah, 6 is best for me.
Okay.
6 p.m.
I'll have Jen Schaefer send that invite out.
And we're calling that a work session, correct?
Yes.
And it is open to the public. They
It is
they
open
can
to the
come just
public,
like a board
yes,
meeting.
Yes.
I just hope everyone here that can possibly make that will be here. And tell your friends and their friends that live in the district that have any interest in discussing this really important topic to show up. It's the 27th at 6 p.m.
However, let's be clear, this is a work session, this is not a public participation section. So we will be discussing, you can stay and listen for as long as you choose to, but it is not a public, there's not public participation at that meeting, just so we are clear before anybody comes in and wants to participate.
Correct.
Okay, so we have that work session set up for 6 p.m. on March 27th, which is what day of the week?
Monday.
Monday.
Monday. Okay. Any other discussion from board members?
I have some discussion. So you guys elected me to be the Great Oaks representative, so I've been going to those board meetings every month. If you have a free 3 hours, come and join me. But I wanted to share back. I don't know a lot. I don't know how much other folks know about Great Oaks, but I didn't know a ton about it. And so I thought I would take some opportunity during this meeting to share what you guys are sending me there for. So this month is when the students were accepted to the programs for next year. Students go to the Great Oaks as juniors and then as seniors, and they work on specific degrees. The programs are limited to a certain number of students based on both staff that can teach it and then workspace. So there were 1,714 juniors accepted across the 4 campuses. For Milford, we have 78. These are numbers last week. I don't know if Dan's here, if they got updated, but as of last week, it was 78 going to Live Oaks, which is just our closest location, 17 to Scarlett, and 7 to Laurel. There are 1,551 returning seniors for next year. It tends to drop off a little bit because some of these courses, like electrician, they can either come back to school for a year or they can go start earning money, and that's a really hard way. You know, they're getting their degree either way. The 7 programs that filled to capacity here at Live Oaks are animal science and management, vet assistant, heavy equipment, culinary, cosmetology, welding, and automotive service tech. So that's awesome. That's just the programs that filled. I have the full spreadsheet if folks are interested in seeing what else was there. But it is such a great resource to have our students be able to take advantage of that so close. So that's my Great Oaks update for the day.
I just wanted to add something to that because what you said reminded me. We had a STEAM night at SciPelt this past week, and we had some of those Live Oak students showing what they do in animal sciences and in the automotive studies, and it was a really great experience for the SciPelt kids to see what goes on in those programs, and it was really, really interesting.
They're, for those of you who drive by, they're doing some updates to Live Oaks now. I don't know when, you guys know, I think it's done in September. I will bring back, but I'm sure there will be like a welcome back and come see our new facility, so I'll let folks know about when that happens. But it's like literally right around the corner, so that's exciting. And then totally unrelated, Special Olympics track practices have started for our students. I know specifically for Pattison because I'm a coach, but the track meet for Claremont County is going to be April 22nd out at New Richmond. And when I go out there and I see their facility and their bathrooms and their bleachers, you know, the hope is perhaps one day we could host something like the Special Olympics Claremont County at Milford. Although New Richmond might be more central for the entire district, but Special Olympics is coming up. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
I have a feeling you're next.
Hopefully I'm last. It's been a long evening. Good news report, reiterating some of the things that Mr. Kaufman said. Brooke Chamberlain's a finalist for the Cincinnati Art Academy Overture Award for Theater Arts, I believe. Congratulations to the Winter Guard, the Winter Guard A, which is kind of our JV, is undefeated, and they've got another, at least one more event to do. And the open squad's #1 in the state and #3 in the nation. That is huge, guys. That is really huge. State meet is April 1st in Dayton, and the national competition is in Indianapolis on the 13th of April. So those are coming up. The HOSA, future health professionals team had 6 individuals who qualified for the state competition. I think that's kind of a new group for us here, so that's the first time I had heard HOSA, so hopefully it hasn't been around for 10 years. DECA, who has been around for quite a few years, sent 49 people to the state competition, and 2 have qualified for the national competition. Again, that's huge. They do a really good job with that program. TPA, and that's the Teaching Professionals Associations, qualified 8 to the state competition, and then 6 of those are moving on to the national competition. Robotics qualified 5 teams to the World Championships, 3 of them from the junior high, 2 of them from the high school. So good luck to all of these people as they're competing at the national level. Dates to remember. Is that 3 minutes?
Yes, that's the kinder, gentler 3-minute warning.
It's not a bad idea.
Very, very good. Okay, moving right along here. Dates to remember. The theater is doing their last shows of the year before we renovate. Wizard of Oz at the high school level, the 17th and 18th, and the junior high is going to come in and do it on the 24th and the 25th. So you can see the same show, and you can see how the older kids do it and how the younger kids do it. They still have tickets on sale, but it's getting close to a sellout. So you want to get on those if you want to go. I'm going to be there tomorrow night. The Robbins Building Wrestling Reunion, which is called Running It Back at the Robbins Building, is scheduled for March 24th. That's kind of a last event there before that particular venue goes away. The Fine Arts Fair is going to take place at the high school on the 21st and 22nd of April. On the 21st, we're going to have our first fine arts signing day. So we are going to recognize the students that are continuing in performance careers at the collegiate level. The Milford baseball reunion for the class, or for teams of 2002 and 2003 is going to be held on the 29th. If you're not familiar with those 2 classes, those are the 2 classes that went to the state finals and finished runner-up 2 years in a row. Prom is on the 29th of April at the Oasis Golf Club and Conference Center. Flight night is also at the Oasis Golf and Conference Center on May 11th, so a couple of weeks after that. And Dick LeBeau, an NFL Hall of Famer, is going to be the guest speaker, and the introductory speakers are Ken Anderson, former quarterback for the Bengals, and David Fulcher, former safety and cornerback for the Bengals. The varsity baseball team is going to play Baden High School at Great American Ballpark on Saturday, May 13th, 10 a.m. That's a cool event for the kids to get to play in a really big ballpark, and if you can go out and support them, that would be great. And the last thing, graduation is Saturday, May 20th. Okay, so our next regular board meeting is April the 20th, 2023, in this room at 6 p.m. We are now going to, as a board, move into executive session. I'm going to need a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of considering the employment and compensation of a public employee.
So moved.
Second.
Why don't you call the roll, Mr. Espy?
Mrs. Nolan?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, we will not be returning after executive session. We will adjourn from in there. So we appreciate your time, and we will see you on April the 20th. Thank you.